Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. As we are shifting gears here to the MLB, we're going to be going over some of the biggest headlines in the MLB from Wednesday, July 31st. And the first of which that we're going to be talking about is the New York Yankees, who were able to pull off a sweep after they've sort of been under the spotlight, a lot of criticism going against them. The fact that they had been scuffling since mid-June, and they have been very good coming out of the All-Star break. And obviously one of the most exciting parts of that is the addition of Jazz Chisholm to the roster. He now has a hit in every game that he's appeared in so far for the Yankees. And during this series against the Phillies, he was able to hit 4 home runs over the course of games 1 and 2. They end up closing it out on Wednesday with a 6-5 win, and feels like this is a Yankees team where you can really start to, buy into what they have a little bit more. Now, obviously, the way that they started the regular season shows in the first place that they were a force to be reckoned with, at least to some degree, but their flaws started to pop up a little bit more, especially once Giancarlo Stanton went down with injury. We were seeing the fact that outside of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, there really was not much offense going on that roster, and that if you pitch around those two guys, you can sort of get away with it there. But now you look at this Yankees team and the way that they have been able to add Jazz to the roster. I know there are some Yankees fans that were hoping that they would have gone out and done more, but you add Jazz to the picture. Giancarlo Stanton returned from injury in this series, and you look overall, the starting lineup that they threw out yesterday: Gleyber Torres, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Jazz Chisholm Jr., Anthony Volpe, Alex Verdugo. I mean, that's a solid top 7. Now, maybe I'm reaching a little bit for Verdugo at 7. Gleyber Torres isn't necessarily incredible from the leadoff spot. I do wonder whether or not we are going to see. I feel like I have to imagine that Jazz is going to take over that leadoff spot, especially the way that, again, you look at the level of production that he's been giving the Yankees so far, that it seems like he probably, would be best suited as their leadoff guy. That's been a very big conversation with the Yankees, is trying to find someone to, fill out that role for them. There was a very brief, experiment of throwing Ben Rice in there, who Ben Rice, by the way, I mean, obviously his average is somewhere in the 180, 190 territory, but good amount of home runs at this point to add to that as well. So, I mean, maybe a little bit of pop that you can throw in at the back of their lineup as well. But you look at Jazz and what he's been doing since joining the Yankees. He has an on-base percentage of 400, and sure, you feel like that's probably going to come down at some point. But, I mean, again, just somebody actually getting guys on for Aaron Judge and doing so, with some pretty top-end athleticism. If you're looking at Jazz Chisholm and Juan Soto together, that is definitely a real positive moving forward here. And, again, I probably would have really liked to see the Yankees go after maybe a starter. That conversation gets a little bit tricky because of the fact that, sure, you would like a starter, but what was the price that you were going to have to pay to actually get there is definitely a complicated situation to dive into. So I can definitely defend them on that note, but I mean, even still, this feels like an American League that is very much for the taking, and the Yankees are doing everything you could possibly ask of them coming out of the All-Star break. So some positive developments there. On the other end, very quickly here, no panic from me in terms of Philadelphia. The Dodgers are now right on their tails, and it doesn't even feel like the Dodgers are necessarily playing their best baseball right now, but they're just 2.5 games back. It was at one point a lot more substantial than that. The Brewers creeping up as well, only 4 games back of the Phillies. So I've been talking about how I feel like it's sort of the Phillies and the Dodgers league, and everybody else is sort of fighting for their shot from there. But ultimately, maybe it's even a little bit more open than that. But let me know what your thoughts are on that in the comment section. But we also yesterday saw Jackson Holliday get called back up to the Orioles, who Holliday was the number one prospect in all of baseball, and it was very exciting to see him get his chance. I believe it was around April that he made his debut, and it was not going well for him for a significant part of that stretch, and he ultimately was recalled back down to the minors following that. Played 10 games, and his batting average was under 100, and it was just nowhere near the level of excitement that we were sort of waiting on. But still just 20 years old. I have no concerns with him long term, but he came back up to the majors yesterday for their game against the Toronto Blue Jays, and he ended up hitting his first home run of his career that resulted in a grand slam, and was able to give the Orioles their significant lead to carry out this game. And was just really fun to see there, just from a player development standpoint. You had to feel bad for Holliday a little bit, considering all of the pressures that were put on him when he was first called on, and we were first getting into the MLB season, so storylines were still sort of slowly developing at that point, and all eyes were on him. But here he is, and he may be there to stay, considering the fact that we did just get the unfortunate news yesterday that Jordan Westburg has a fractured hand after he was hit by a pitch during that game. Now, the hope is that he could eventually come back from injury before the playoffs start, but this is definitely a big time loss for the Orioles. And I just talked about the fact that the Yankees seem to be piecing it together in their own right, that it's going to be a very contested race to the end here between the Orioles and the Yankees for that division lead. As things currently stand, the Orioles are just half a game ahead of the Yankees. So again, going to be neck and neck down the stretch there. There's some thoughts out there circulating online that the Orioles could maybe look to one of their top prospects in Coby Mayo to try and help also supplement some of the offensive power loss that they're losing with Jordan Westburg going down. Would probably require some shuffling, I would say, in terms of the defensive identity there, considering the fact that Mayo is listed as an outfielder on Fangraphs. I'm not sure if maybe he has some extra experience being an infielder, but it is definitely not exactly the perfect fit there, so we'll have to see. Very unfortunate news on the Jordan Westburg front. And then the last thing from yesterday that I did just want to sort of at least briefly hit here is the Arizona Diamondbacks are very it's a very positive, for the most part, stretch of the season for them. They've won 13 of 17 games, and you feel like the World Series runner-ups from last season are maybe starting to hit their stride, but there's one big issue that is on the table for them, and that would be their situation with their closer. Paul Sewald has really not looked himself as of this month, was once one of the best closers in baseball as recently as this past year, and he just continues to struggle as of late. In July, he blew 4 saves, including 3 straight early on in the month. And just yesterday, he was called upon again in the 9th inning as the Diamondbacks were up 5-3. And ultimately, he ended up loading the bases, and the Diamondbacks had to pull him out of the game in favor of Ryan Thompson to come in and try and bail him out. Now, again, it was a 2-run lead at that point, so Thompson ends up having a passed ball. I thought it was a very catchable pitch, but Herrera wasn't able to bring it in behind the plate, and that scored 1. Ultimately, the game ends there because Thompson was able to induce the grounder to come away with it, but the Diamondbacks do have to be feeling a little bit worried. Again, like I mentioned, 13 of 17, won 13 of 17 games. I believe all 4 losses have come at a blown save by Paul Sewald. So that's definitely a concerning thing moving forward here, where the Diamondbacks, especially how their bullpen was pitching as they were making their postseason run last year, they're going to need to figure out some sort of solution there. I'm not sure what it is that's going on behind the scenes mentally with Paul Sewald, but not a very good sign there. But we are going to be taking our final break of the show here, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be diving into the Boston Red Sox winning their first series since the All-Star break, talking about the key performances from that, and looking at the Red Sox schedule moving forward as they head into a pretty difficult August. So we will be diving into that. First, final break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.